Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prose Garden, the monthly international lit reading that brings you some of the finest prose being written today. I'm Francine Witte in the US, and my co-host is Meg Pokrass in the UK. We are thrilled to have you both in the Zoom room and those of you watching the recording. We encourage you to use the chat, those of you in the Zoom room, to let the readers know what you are loving. And there's really nothing nicer than going back after you've read and seeing all the, well, I love that line and that sort of thing. And we'll be posting the recording on Facebook later today. And if you hear something you like and want to find out how to purchase a book by one of the readers, just put in the comment on the Facebook post, okay? Today we have a wonderful lineup of readers. Our featured reader is Jeff Friedman, and our spotlight readers are Myna Chang, Dan Crawley, Jacqueline Doyle, Patricia Bidar, Jeff Harvey, Valerie Fox, Tim Craig, and Charlotte Hamrick. So Meg and I like to warm up the airwaves by sharing short pieces that we each wrote. And being that, I know of our feature reader, Jeff, is mostly, I know him primarily as a prose poet, although I know he writes micros as well. But in his honor, I'm going to read a prose poem. This is called, Where Did You Go? I went thin as pears, all sliced up and see-through. I went halfway to happy. I went to a place where I don't have to answer. I went sniff in the air. I went to the arms of another. I went bent as bones. I went to a job without a computer where I stand in a field and the sun wets my back. I went behind the numbers on a wristwatch. I went hundreds of miles from your eyes. I went all in marriage and you cannot stop me. I went where your questions stop smack in the air and long before they can get into my ears. I went to before I even know you. The spot in the morning about to begin, that curl of a mouth turning into a smile, that moment a flower opens up like a hand. And now, thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Meg Pokrass, who will read a micro and then introduce our featured reader, Jeff Friedman. Meg?
Thank you so much, Francine. Okay, so I'm also reading a prose poem. It's called At Home When You Aren't Home Anymore. Today, a woman is yelling at the pharmacist. At home, your kid contemplates his graffiti program. Your mother is angry at your former brother-in-law. Last night, your sister broke down on the phone, can't pay her property taxes. The dog looks fat. You have been too busy to walk him, too anxious to go outside. The clouds are pregnant. You are lonely. When you touch your husband, you want to be holding the cat, the one who died last week. So now we'll hear from our very first featured reader, Jeff Friedman. Jeff Friedman's 10th collection, Ashes in Paradise, was recently published by Mad Hat Press. Friedman's poems, many tales and translations have appeared in American Poetry Review, Poetry, New England Review, Poetry International, Cast Iron Airplanes That Can Actually Fly, commentaries from 80 American poets on their prose poetry, Flash Fiction Funny, Flash Nonfiction Funny, Fiction International, Plume, 100-Word Story, Cleaver, Dreaming Awake, New Contemporary Prose Poetry from the United States, Australia and the United Kingdom, and the New Republic, and Best Microfiction 2021, 2022, and 2023. He has received an NEA Literature Translation Fellowship and numerous other awards and prizes. And Jeff and I have co-written a book of microprose together, which came out in 2022. Just a note for me. It's called The House of Grana Padano, and it was published by Pelicanesis. Welcome, Jeff Friedman.
Thank you, Meg and Francine, for that nice introduction. And also thank you for both doing prose poems as intro. So I'll feed this back by doing 2 micros to start. So as Meg said, my new book, which I accidentally put in earlier, is Ashes in Paradise, and Mad Hat Press is publishing it. They've done one other book of mine too, before, Floating Tales. I'm going to read pieces from that and then also some other pieces. So I'm going to start with like a micro. And when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Paul Newman's. He was Jewish. I'm Jewish, and you kind of look for things to like with your identity. It was a time of great anti-Semitism around where I lived. So anyway, this is called Newman's Own, but it has nothing to do actually with anti-Semitism. I'll say that too. It's a lighter piece. My lover thought I was Paul Newman, which is probably why she became my lover. One night in bed, I told her the truth. I'm not Paul Newman. She started to laugh. You're a joker, all right, she said. No, really. Paul Newman has blue eyes that are clear as skies. I've got dark, beady brown eyes, Hungarian eyes. He has a square jaw, and I have a weak chin hidden by my beard. I've never made love to Liz Taylor or Dominic Sanda or Joanne Woodward, and I don't drink 2 6-packs in 2 months, let alone 2 hours. Well, she said, your tomato sauce is pretty good. The second piece, thanks. The second piece is about someone who's something we can all relate to, losing his shape. It's called Shape. Shape. You've lost your shape, my lover says. As she cleans the surface of the coffee table, she clicks her tongue and shakes her head without even looking at me. I rise from the couch. How so? I ask. She steps back, taking me in with her eyes. You're shapeless, she says. No other way to say it. That's impossible. Everybody, everything has a shape. What am I? An egg? A crooked trapezoid? A square with fuzzy edges? No, you're more like a dollop of whipped cream or a blob of jam or foam and latte, though not so tasty. Can we stick to geometry? I ask. This seems more about chaos, she says, folding her dust rag. Look in the mirror. I walk into the bathroom. She's right. I'm shapeless. I can't find my belly or face. How am I even able to wear clothes? I ask. Loosely, she says. What causes someone to lose his shape, I wonder? Too much self-preoccupation or too little? I should have eaten better, taken care of myself. My lover puts her arm around me, and her arm appears to float in fog. I'm sure there's an exercise you can do to regain shape or some words you can chant or a yoga pose that might be perfect for just this condition, she says. Maybe there's a doctor who specializes in treating this, I reply. She smiles, and even if there isn't, but something is happening in the bathroom light. Out of my shapelessness, a new shape is emerging, even if it is still in flux, even if we can't quite see it. Thanks. This next piece is called My Mother's Dress Shop, and it was published in Best Microfiction as well as some other places. And it's somewhat autobiographical. My mother had a dress shop in Midtown St. Louis when I was growing up, and she used to say she sold sexy clothes. And I would sometimes work down there when I was a teenager, and mostly what I did was unload trucks and break down boxes. So anyway, this is it. Break down the boxes that held the clothing and stuff them into the dumpster in the alley behind the shop. Break down the racks that held the sexy dresses, the leather coats, the French lingerie, until they are just rods and wheels lying in a corner. Fold up the clothing neatly. Break down the counter, the shelves, and the cash register empty of cash. Break down the shadows that no longer hold voices. Break down the light that drops through the window like a message until it is just a scrap of light. Break down the dust that clings to the walls and counters that your mother attacks with a cloth and Windex. Break down the mannequins until they are disconnected limbs, head, and torso. Now there is only the memory of a memory, the striped cat leaping on the counter, its tail ticking back and forth. The nurses in white uniforms peeking in the windows of air to spot a skirt or blouse on sale. Your mother's voice coming back to you like the smells of a fresh cinnamon sweet roll and steaming black coffee, and the blaze of sun that makes it impossible to see. The next piece called Tea with Honey. It has a lot of dialogue, but I think you'll be able to follow it. And there's some narration in it as well. It's a dialogue between a man and a woman about a woman who has just died. So, Tea with Honey. She recalled for him the stained curtains, the rippled breadboard, the serrated bread knife with its crooked teeth, the cracks in the air, the moths rising from the old woman's chest. But you weren't there, he said. He walked over to the couch and sat down. You only remember what I told you. She shook her head. I remember what I remember. She was dying. I boiled the water, held the cup to her lips while she sipped the tea with honey. He held up his palm to stop her. Why are you remembering this now? Ignoring his question, she went on. Even with all the covers and the hot tea, she shivered. I spread 2 heavy blankets over her. I don't remember any of it, he said. And I don't remember you, he shouted. Shh, she whispered. Then she boiled water, made tea with honey. Sitting next to him, she brought the cup to his lips. Drink, she said, and he did. So the next piece is called Lost Memory, and it's the last piece in my collection. And not that that's that relevant, but because it could have been the first piece too. But this piece grew out of an argument I had with my older sister, and I tried to write it from a kind of literal point of view, but eventually it took off into something else. But anyway, when I was in 2nd grade, I had double pneumonia and I was sick for 7.5 months. And my mother invited all the students over and the teacher over to kind of prove I was doing something more than reading comic books and watching TV, which is actually all I was doing. But she made me memorize all the presidents and recite like little stories about the cherry tree, So and she also baked all these great things that were in the kitchen, and all the kids were like waiting for me to get through the recitation. They started actually wandering. It's like a reading where people start wandering out to get the food. Well, that's what happened while I was reciting the presidents. But anyway, I told my sister this and recalling it, and then like a month or 2 later, she started to tell me that she had had double pneumonia when she was growing up, and all the kids had been invited over the house. So we kind of got in an argument over that. I think she imported the memory, but in any case, we left it at that, and I finally wrote something about it. So it's called Lost Memory, after a long preface to a short piece. That should be the name of another piece. Long preface to a short piece. Okay. My sister stole a memory of mine from my house and took it home, hidden in her coat. I couldn't remember the memory, but there was an empty space on the sideboard under the window. Give me back the memory, I said, standing outside her door, and I won't report you to the authorities. She let me in. Don't be ridiculous, she said. Why would I steal a memory of yours? It didn't take me long to find the memory, a blue jar sitting on the glass stand between 2 chairs. When I picked it up, she looked puzzled. This is my place, she said. These are my things. Not true, I replied, and unscrewed the lid. Emptiness wafted out with its stinging scent. Now I remembered something I had wanted to forget. I screwed the lid back on quickly and set it down. That's my memory, she said. You shouldn't have opened it. Then what do you remember? I asked. Nothing. It's gone because you let it out. And as I stood there angry at my sister, the scent of the memory evaporated, and all I could remember was the jar, and now that belonged to her. So over the years, I've done numerous, and I mean numbers of pieces about monsters and imaginary creatures. And this is one of several that appears in my book, Catching the Monster. On Main Street, I spot the monster in the crowd. He's clean shaven, but there are red nicks on his cheeks and chin. He's got long claws that can rip a chest apart in seconds. No one in the crowd appears to notice that the monster is among them. I follow closely, weaving in and out until I'm almost stepping on his heels. Suddenly, he turns to face me. "You're a monster," I say. He licks the stain of blood from his lips. "Is that so bad?" he asks. "There are many missing," I answer, "and bones scattered throughout the city. Without even a glance, people walk by or around us. Neon signs blink. Cars jam the noisy streets, growing jumpy, music blasting from open windows. There are always many missing, always trails of clues leading everywhere and nowhere," he says. I grip his forearm, causing him to grimace. "I'm taking you in." The monster breathes in my face. His breath is sweet, as if he has eaten a sweet meat. He stares deep into my eyes, searching for my secrets. "If you believe in monsters, perhaps you are a monster," he says. "Isn't that what all monsters say?" I ask. "Point well taken," he answers, "but you do have a powerful jaw, yellow eyes, and spotted skin, like the rest of us monsters." I cuff his wrist to mine, head to the station to turn us both in for the reward. And one last piece, The Last Truth. So I've also written lots of pieces about the distortion of truth in our time and with this totalitarian kind of movement going on. So this is another one called Last Truth. One truth was shot while it sat in a cafe, sipping an Americano and writing its memoir. Another truth rose up on stage and protested the swarm of lies that had descended on the town, clinging to heads and faces or flying down throats. The mob rushed the stage, humbling this truth until it fell beneath them. They kicked and stomped it to death. Another truth was tortured until it confessed it was a lie, and then the spirit left its body, and only emptiness resided inside it. Many truths were burned in the public square as they screamed, "I'm telling the truth." We collected their ashes and bone in an urn and tried to bring them back to life with spells and chants, but our words had lost their belief in the power to summon. And the last truth, hiding for months in abandoned buildings, escaped into the forest. When it returned years later, no one recognized it or believed what it was saying. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Those are just wonderful pieces.
Thanks.
So now we're going to do a little interview with you, or I get to. I'm very lucky. So Jeff, I wanted to ask you, how do you see that your writing has changed over the years? I was originally a fan of your lineated poetry, and then you changed to writing prose poetry, and now you're focusing quite a lot on the micro story. Can you tell us a little bit about the metamorphosis?
Yeah. I think when I was writing traditional sort of lineated verse, and I kind of maybe I hit a wall. I felt that, especially early on, until I loosened up and started getting more humor into the poems and lines, I kind of felt that I had to make at least a few people cry during a reading. I had to be as morbid as I could possibly be. And then I started letting a little bit more humor and a little bit more. I was a class clown growing up, so I started letting a little bit more humor into my work and some other sides of it, and different things started coming out of my my poems and lines. And as that happened, I felt that there was still something kind of not getting out there, that was just kind of being left behind. And I began to wonder if my lines were really lines anymore, if they really needed them. So I just started eliminating them and going into the prose paragraph. And at first, I have to say, they were kind of like you could have put them back in lines. And then one day they kind of transformed into, really what I consider prose poems versus just lineated poems that I had allowed to go in. And I just felt like that opened up a huge world for me and allowed me to do just so much more because I was always a storyteller. You know what I mean? I started out really writing stories. And when I was a kid, I really started writing in this. I got really involved with fairy tales, myths, and fables because I used to get kicked out of class in grade school. And they would put me in this little janitor's closet, which housed the school library. And that's all they had was tales and fables and myths. And so I read all of them. So that kind of informed. So all of a sudden, that stuff started to get into my lineated poems and then started to really open up into my prose poems. And then from there, I think, I just was reading so much different stuff. I think the storytelling influence started taking over. I started hearing dialogue um, to begin pieces. Before, I think I always heard, I was always like a kind of an image that started, or a sound. And then it started being dialogue. And I couldn't say that my prose poems, there's a lot of dialogue too, but or there's some dialogue, but I think I started hearing dialogue or opposition, not so much dialogue, but opposition to begin a piece. So my first line would have this opposition into it, in addition to which it usually had something floating up into heaven or somebody losing their weight or falling down, or something else like that. So that's how I kind of migrated into the micro, I think. And now I think they kind of speak to each other, the micro and the prose poem. I'm kind of in a dialogue. It's sort of like these two things battling it out of my head, kind of like Woody Allen and Mel Brooks fighting for control.
That's great. Thanks. And who and what have been your biggest influences, would you say?
Well, okay. So I was thinking about that. I've always been, kind of thinking about that. And I think it's like almost too numerous to mention. And also, if I start thinking about people like contemporary people I've worked with, like like you or Nina Andrews or Arzavinia or so many other people, but if I start thinking back on it, I mean, I have to think about those, like what was the influences, tales, myth, the Bible, the biblical prose. And each step along the way, there was sort of a different set of influences. Like, early on, I think it was like Philip Levine and Allen Ginsberg and Sylvia Plath's, her bebox poems and those kind of things really influenced because they had a sense of humor. And then Daddy's sort of nursery rhyme rhythm. And I really love Dan Sexton's Transformation. That's the book that retells fairy tales, and as I moved on, Zbigniew Herbert and Wisława Szymborska became big influences. James Wright, of course. And I liked, Nina Andrews' version of her translations and Sid Lee's translations of Henri Michaud, Max Jacob, and they were my influences. And also, I read a lot of Pablo Neruda and the Spanish Surrealists, so that came in as a big kind of influence. And not to just drag this out into everybody in the world, but I think as we get to micro, I mean, I stick back to my fictional influences, Grace Paley and Cortázar, and Daniel Carms, Galeano, Clarice Lispector, Ludmila Petrovskaya, and some of those other people. And I have to say Margaret Atwood. And I have to come back to Woody Allen's short little memoir pieces, which I found to be fun. So I think it's been a whole barrage of pieces. And I feel like I mentioned you and so many others, Francine, Scott Alero, Pam Painter, Zavinia, Kathy Maguki, Nin. I'm just trying to think of all the people that I feel like I'm talking back and forth with in when I'm writing. So it's quite a few people. I mean, so it's hard, how you take things in when you I can't forget Augusto Monterosso. Black Sheep and Other Fables was a tremendous influence on me early on. And Kafka, he would kill me if I forgot him.
So tell us about your new collection.
Well, I think the collection's divided into 4 sections, and it kind of, I guess it was sort of headed off with these kind of fabulous pieces and improvisations and retellings that kind of tried to deal with the darkness of our age and what's been going on. I was like looking at the pandemic, and there are some pandemic pieces in there, but it's sort of like there's a lot of humor in there and a lot of dark humor too, but trying to deal with that in these different ways. I think the first section is sort of aimed at like the stuff that was going on around us for the last 10 years, you know, including the police shootings. There's a humorous piece in my first section that has to do with someone sneezing and everybody hitting the ground in the grocery store. And, you know, and then there's the stuff, like I said, the stuff about the police shootings and other things like that. But I tried to cut relationships during that time and how they were affected. And then I think in the next section is sort of a section of biblical retellings and fairy tale retellings. And that too is kind of informed by everything, but they, you know, there's funny ones as well as very dark ones in there. And then in section 3, there's sort of a series of relationship pieces. So I try to, and then the last section is kind of family. And so I kind of tried to cover these various spectrums of society and what's going on socially. And so I think constitutes the book. And then I finished with, there's a lot about memory there. I finished with lost memory. And then this essay I did, a craft essay on the lost memory, which is actually another piece about about how I wrote the lost memory.
Great. And I was going to say that as a poet, your work feels really personal. And how would you say that writing about the self and about your own life plays out, say, in your microfiction as opposed to in your poetry?
Well, it's not, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I think at some point around the time I wrote the book Flooding Tales, which I got kind of sick of talking about my life, or trying to be like so accurate. And I was writing about St. Louis and growing up and working in the garment district and working in the factories and trying to be like, this is place and I've got to get this. And I began to realize like 20 years out that I was trying to capture a mythic St. Louis anyway. It was no longer, I mean, I could make up anything I wanted when I read on the East Coast, but when I came back to St. Louis, I realized I better tell the truth about what I was saying because, they all knew what the place names were. So I started moving away from the autobiographical eye, starting in, I guess, that book, Floating Tales, and moving, not that I didn't come back to it, but I started writing much more fictionally and mixing so much more, mixing so much more fiction and making the character a total persona. Maybe I'm in there somewhere, but the realities of those pieces and what continued for a while were tangential to the reality, to the experience that as I may have experienced it. Because obviously, most of those pieces in there are still somewhere based on they're based on maybe a story that I read, but they may also be based on somewhere in the background, something I did. And I think recently, weirdly enough, I've tried to come back to something a little more autobiographical, but only 3/4 tale, 1/4 autobiographical, or something like that. Maybe that's the percentage. Yeah. I don't know. Did that answer the question? Usually I talk until everybody forgets the question.
No, that did. Thank you. And I'm now going to thank you so much, Jeff. I'm going to turn it back to Francine now. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a wonderful reading and just an insight also into your process, which is fascinating. And I put in the chat that I like how you're both funny and deep, poignant at the same time, which is really no small feat. And so before you leave us, would you read one more short piece for us?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll read this. I'm following up on The Last Truth since we've been, I've been watching. I think I'll read this piece called Homeland. It's kind of a humorous piece, but it's also about nations and homelands and what homeland. You should visit Hungary, my sister said. It's our homeland. How can it be my homeland? I asked. I've never been there. Everyone there has Dad's brown eyes and his rock of a chin. Everyone looks like him and like us, my sister said. I peered into my sister's face and saw my father's face, and then my own. I remembered how my father combed wildroot into his black curly hair, huffing so forcefully he fogged up the bathroom mirror, how he whipped the comb away, flinging oily drops on the tile floor, how at dinner he inhaled the hot breath of Hungarian stew as though it were the air rising from the earth of his homeland. A country of our people, I thought, everyone looking like everyone else, everyone looking like us, every face a mirror of every face. Scary, I said. I'm not going.
Wonderful, Jeff. Jeff Friedman, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Now we're going to hear from some of the spotlight readers. But before we do, I wanted to say that I'm very delighted and thrilled, as Meg is, with the quality of the readers who are visiting us today in the Prose Garden. But equally, I'm also impressed with the people who have just come to listen. And I want to give them a little bit of a shout out. We have in our audience, Catherine Silverhajo, Kathleen Maguki, Guy Biederman, Lisa Ferranti, Lorette Luzajic, Don Steffler, Andrea Marcusa, Bill Merkley, Luella Lester, Colleen Randall, Chelsea Stickle, Miriam Mandel, who's my beautiful aunt. I love her so much, and she's like going to be 99 next month, and she's here. And Jamie Bond and Megan Karanjakar. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. It's just delightful to see you. Now we're going to move on to the spotlight readers. And first, we're going to hear from Myna Chang, who's also serving as our bouncer today. Myna Chang is the author of The Potential of Radio and Rain. Her writing has been selected for Flash Fiction America, Best Small Fictions, and Craft. She has won the Lascaux Prize in Creative Nonfiction and the New Millennium Award in Flash Fiction. Find her at mynachang.com. Myna Chang.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm happy to be here with such a great group of friends. I've got two little micros to read, so I think I'll come in the right amount of time. This first one is a little shorty, 142 words. This was in Cease Cows back in March. This is titled Blackberry Nights. You watched your grandmother cut back the blackberry canes every spring, saw how she bore the thorns and the loss. This is love, she said, when her skin split and her blood dripped into the soil. After you understood the source of the bramble's rampant growth, you swore off legacy and family obligation and left, never to return, never to sacrifice the fruit of your own marrow. Now, though, with summer on the wane, your veins swell to bursting, and you think of your grandmother, the paper bark of her skin and the glint of her teeth, fierce and sharp under the kindred moon, and you swear to God you'd kill for a drop of her hedgerow wine. Another taste of that blackberry night. So you return to the canes, take up the shears and the paring knife. You love and you bleed. So this next one's a little bit longer, 293 words. This was in New World Writing back in July. This one is titled Daily Special. Not much to see in Tascadora, Texas. Rough strip of road, 2 liquor stores, 3 churches. The Happy Harvest Grocery, its parking lot smooth as buttercream. Tessa holes up in her minivan next to the cart return cage. Red velvet is the cake of the day. She scoops a glob of frosting with her fingers, sucks away the sheen. Artificial sweetness limbs her cuticles. In the next row, Dottie Stein yells into her phone. A shock of yellow hair is snagged in the grill of her van. Could be deer hide, Tessa thinks, or fur from the Garcia's dumbstruck golden doodle. Hadn't it gone missing last week? Maybe it's a wedge of Dottie's husband's scalp. That glint of white there by the Chrysler logo, is that a shard of bone? Tessa gouges her fingers into the cake, raises the rigid clamshell container to her lips. Constance Barnes slides into the handicap spot. She keeps her motor running. Tessa watches as a boy no older than 17 lopes out of the alley behind the store. His thighs look like they could go all night. He approaches Constance's car, smiles fresh. There's a quick handoff of cash, and Tessa wonders if he's selling pot. Or, she thinks, maybe it's those night-long legs that are on offer. Constance cracks open her car door, leans out, slashes a bright knife across the boy's thigh. He hisses, clutches the wet gash on his leg. Constance guns her engine. Her tires sing as she launches out of the parking lot. Tessa's eyes follow the folded cash. It disappears into the boy's pocket. He grimaces, teeth glinting like chrome. Tessa swallows the last of the velvet, licks plasticized buttercream from the palm of her hand, wonders how much he charges per slice. And that's that one.
Thank you so much, Myna Chang. And I just, again, want to give Myna a shout out for being just so generous and always being willing to help out with the co-hosting and just, making sure that, we can remove anybody we need to. And so thank you so much, Myna Chang. And that was a wonderful reading.
You happy to do it.
Thank you. Our next reader is Dan Crawley, who just incidentally, I think Dan wins the award for probably being just seriously one of the most generous people on Twitter and Facebook in terms of sharing. Sometimes I don't even know I've had a story up until I see Dan's post where he's, posted something. Oh, I love this thing. And it's always, I love this. And it's like, he's so wonderful and generous. And thank you, Dan, just for everything that you do. Dan Crawley's writing appears or is forthcoming in Lost Balloon, JMWW, Best Small Fictions, Flash Frog, Atticus Review, and elsewhere. His recent collection is Blur from Cowboy Jamboree Press. Dan Crawley.
Thank you, Francine, and thank you, Meg, for inviting me. I've been a sick boy, so today I'm actually feeling better, and I just downed some cough stuff, and so hopefully I'll be all right. I'm going to read a couple micros from my latest Blur. So this one is called Greetings, and actually this goes back to when I was an undergrad. I got a student job. Student jobs are like the greatest things in the world. And so when I was getting, my degree, I worked at Exercise Science, the Department of Exercise Science, with the coolest people. And I would have stayed at that job forever if I could have. And they just treated me great. And plus, you go in there and they're like, oh, we really don't have much to do today. Just work on your homework or write your papers or whatever and get paid for it. It was beautiful. There was an administrative assistant there that every time I would come in and say hey to her, she would say Witte. And at first I'm like, okay, what is that? And so after, days and weeks and, hearing that over and over and over, she would just like Witte and just walk away from me. And so when I finally figured out what she was doing, making fun of me saying, hey, it always stuck with me. So I wrote a little micro about that. This is called Greetings. He enters the break room while she leaves. It's time to screw up your courage, he tells himself. Hey, he says. Witte, she says, and walks on. Hey, he says again. Witte, she says again over her shoulder. She smirks before ducking into the cubicle. What just happened? He can't help but feel like the flat soda from the fridge. In his cubicle, he realizes her droll greeting in regard to his greeting. His fascination peaks even more since landing this new job. Witte, he says brightly into her cubicle. She swivels in her chair, grins. Hey, she says brightly. So that's that one. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you guys listening. This one's called Groceries. Church and her daughter appeared in the entryway. They were dropping off the bag of groceries. They didn't have time to come in. They had other errands to run. Their house is nicer than ours, the daughter said to her mom. My mom in the entryway, and me sitting on the step of the staircase. The girl was 16, 6 years older than me. She wore a yellow halter top and shorts, clothes she would never wear to church. My mother lives with us, my mom explained to the lady. Her pension pays the rent these days. The lady tried to smile, though her face was cement. She handed my mom a paper bag. The whole time the daughter glared in at me. That's it.
Dan, I'm going to ask.
So I'm just going to read. Sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you want to read that again because you were cutting out a little bit, and it's not a very long piece. So if you want to read it again, that's fine.
Okay.
You know, and then you can read your other piece as well. Okay.
The lady. Okay. The lady from church and her daughter peered into our entryway. They were dropping off a bag of groceries and didn't have time to come in. They had other errands to run. Their house is nicer than ours, the daughter said to her mom. My mom in the entryway and me sitting on the bottom step of the staircase. The girl was 16, 6 years older than me. She wore a yellow halter top and shorts, clothes she would never wear to church. My mother lives with us, my mom explained to the lady. Her pension pays the rent these days. The lady tried to smile, though her face was cement. She handed my mom a paper bag. The whole time the daughter glared in at me. Did you get it that time? Cool. Okay, this last one I'll read is a little bit longer, but I actually got it published as a Dear Wig Leaf. So, and I always like this. And, you know, so when Scott said I got in a wig leaf, he said, do you want to do a postcard? And I know a lot of you who've been in wig leaf, you know, you get that option. And so I thought, and I thought, well, do I just want to send him some kind of BS or just be snarky, or what do I want to do? And then when it's always in the morning, you know, when you're getting up and getting ready to go to work or to teach or whatever, it just hit me. This whole story hit me like in one, how it all played out. And I literally wrote it all down. And I think this is one of the few things that I didn't change one word. So it's pretty cool. That was in my subconscious, you know, writing itself. Last night, it's called Tiki. Last night, you said you didn't remember what happened 20 years ago, but I know you still remember. You had found an old brick in the garage and spent hours carving it with a chisel, creating an amazing tiki statue. And when you showed it to me, I grabbed it, ran into the house, and then appeared on the second-story balcony. I held the tiny statue over the railing. From below, you begged me not to do it, but I did. Your beautiful brick tiki statue broke into 4 chunks on the patio. I really don't remember, you said. Not a big deal, you said. It is a big deal, I said. So I showed up at your place at 1 a.m. I brought a sledgehammer and went to town on your brick planter. I knew you wouldn't hear. You were pretty drunk last night. Luckily, out of the rubble, 4 bricks were salvageable. I also brought along a regular hammer and chisel. I sat on your lawn with a tiny flashlight between my teeth and chiseled like mad. Unfortunately, none of the bricks looked like your tiki statue. I was pretty drunk too, but more like statues of bug-eyed, lopsided-nosed old men. I placed them in a row on your lawn, all facing the street, earnestly watching the horizon. It's the least I could do. That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan Crawley.
Sure.
Next, we're going to hear from Jacqueline Doyle, Jackie Doyle. And one of the fun parts, if not the most fun part of doing a reading, is you get to ask people you really like their stuff to read. And Jackie is just one of those. I love her work. And she might even be reading a little CNF, if I'm not mistaken, because I know she writes a lot of it. Because at the Prose Garden, we want to celebrate all forms of prose, flash fiction, CNF, creative nonfiction, prose poetry, you know, maybe even short essays, whatever. So Anyway, Jacqueline Doyle's flash chapbook, The Missing Girl, is available from Black Lawrence Press. She has nonfiction flash and micros in Centaur, Midway Journal, JMWW, Tram Set, Gone Lawn, Matchbook, Little Fiction, Big Truths, The Collages, and Sweet, which is forthcoming, and has been featured in Creative Nonfiction's Short Reads. Find her online at www.jacquelinedoyle.com and on Twitter at DoyleJack. Ladies and gentlemen, Jacqueline Doyle.
Thank you, Francine. And indeed, I'm going to read some CNF, but also a little bit of fiction. I'm the CNF editor at Craft, and I love seeing fiction writers cross over into CNF, poets cross over into CNF. It's always exciting. Thank you, Dan. That was really great. And I've had a cold for a week too. Isn't that strange? It's in California. My voice is just a little strange today. In addition to my bio, I'm excited to have some micros coming out, and they're CNF in Flash Boulevard at the beginning of the year. So I'll read a nonfiction flash and 100-word microfiction. There are a lot of numbers in the flash, but you don't have to do any math, so don't get weirded out by the title, which is The Arithmetic of Memory. After graduation, you flew from the US to Europe on a one-way ticket to join friends on a motorcycle trip from Germany to Morocco. 2,000 miles, 3 BMW motorcycles, 4 countries, 5 people, whose past and current histories with each other proved too complicated for camping in close quarters. What you remember: sun glinting on vineyards and green fields in the south of France, the amazing warmth and lightness of the wind on all sides as you gripped the motorcycle with your legs, arms around his waist, leaning into his body on the curves. The fragrance of thyme and lavender, the heady sense of freedom. 3 men, 2 women, 3 Germans, 2 Americans, all 20-something. 2 had been childhood sweethearts and had broken up. 2 would marry in Germany, move to the US, and break up. 2 would move to the US, marry, and break up. 2 were carrying on a clandestine affair during the trip. The mathematical combinations almost too confusing to calculate, like a propositional logic word problem on an aptitude test. What you remember: the 5 of you lounging in a field in Provence on a late summer afternoon, motorcycle helmets and golden corn silk and green husks strewn around you. The rosy light as the sun sank on the horizon. The taste of the pale yellow corn, raw and sweet, and the red wine you swigged out of a bottle, sour like vinegar. You were American, traveling with your German boyfriend. The other 3 were traveling solo, but one of the Germans was having an affair with your boyfriend, which you didn't discover until you were camping in the Pyrenees, when she objected to him sharing a sleeping bag with you. All of the hints she'd been dropping clicked into place. You were stunned. So many years later, you can't remember exactly what he said when you confronted him, what she said, what you said back, or maybe you've chosen to forget. What you remember about northern Spain, how icy cold and clear the rushing stream was when you went down to the swimming hole alone the next morning, how immense the tumbled boulders were in the ravine, a yellow butterfly that fluttered gracefully above you and landed on your wet hair. Did you decide that you'd return north on your own while the other 4 continued south? Or did he decide? Or did you all decide? He drove you back to the Spanish-French border so you could hitch a ride to Germany. You can't remember how many miles you traveled to get there, only that the 2 of you stayed overnight in a hotel. He became feverish from an abscessed tooth, and you found a doctor for him. What you remember about that night: spooning soup into his mouth, the heat of his forehead under your hand as you smoothed back his hair, the tenderness of your lovemaking despite his betrayal, how dim the room was. A young German couple headed for Hanover agreed to take you to Göttingen, and your boyfriend left to join the others in Spain. The trip north must have been close to 1,000 miles. There was no speed limit on the Autobahn, so you can't guess how many hours you drove. They had a fast car, an Audi. You don't remember any stops. What you remember about the long ride, the backs of their heads, your view between the bucket seats, their hands darting to the radio dials, his, then hers, as they bickered over what station to play. How you sobbed quietly in the back seat, eyes swollen, tears sliding down your face. He returned to you in Germany a month later, bearing an armful of blankets from Morocco, a handful of silver rings and bracelets, a bouquet of apologies and promises. You've forgotten the precise arithmetic. How many years of happiness before you married? How many years of marriage before the next infidelity? How many apologies and promises before the divorce? You've lost the jewelry. You still have 2 wool blankets from Morocco, white and brown and charcoal striped and very scratchy. And staying with the theme of marriage and ill-fated enterprises, I have a tiny microfiction that I published in 100-word story. This is called Cassiopeia. He made his move in the planetarium. She'd been gazing up at the outlines of Cassiopeia in the night sky, squinting to see a queen on a throne. She looked down and saw him on his knees, squeezed in front of the folding seat beside her. "Did you lose something?" she said. "Will you marry me?" he asked, holding out the ring. She laughed. She couldn't help herself. What would she tell their children? Your father has always been ridiculous? Or maybe he'd tell the story. Your mother was always an arrogant bitch. Either way, she had to say no. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline Doyle. Beautiful.
Thanks.
Okay, next we're going to hear from Patricia Q. Bidar, and like if not for Patricia, I might not have lived through COVID, because we were in a group, we still technically are, called the Flash Monsters, and we met during the pandemic, during the lockdown, every Saturday night, and we would get together on Zoom and read stories to each other, and it was just wonderful. Like it was like Zoom, it was like silver lining to the whole pandemic, and then Patricia and I met in real life at AWP, and we got this idea to make up write a collab story along with Claudia Monpere, and it just came out in Beaver Magazine last month. Thank you to Patricia's incessant submission. It was called Teeth. So Patricia Bidar is a Western writer whose work has been widely published and anthologized. She serves on staff at Smoke Lawn Quarterly and Quarterly West. Her collection of short fiction is forthcoming in 2025 from Unsolicited Press. Patricia Bidar.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? And so happy to be here. I love seeing everybody, and especially thank you to Megan Francine for inviting me. I have 2 short things for me. The first is called Amusement, and it was published in Ghost Parachute. They met over White Russians at Mr. Bixby's Cocktail Emporium. Faye didn't mind the seedy New Pike amusement park. She grew up spending afternoons at the Les shooting gallery, obliterating targets with a real .22. She'd collect spent cartridges and bring them home. She'd shoot marbles at whiskey bottles with a slingshot. There was laugh in the dark, skee ball, dimes to flick into crystal cups. It was Faye's second date with Mr. Fessler, that is, Derek. She wanted something. She pointed at a mirrored jewelry box. "That's a trinket for an ingenue," Derek murmured into her neck. When he pulled away, she felt the dampness of his lips. Already he was steering her to something on a low shelf, some sort of glider. "Wingspan 12 inches, he said with his high-pitched giggle. "Says here it's faster than last year's." Faye's mother said it was time to try for men at Faye's level or lower. She suggested Mr. Fessler. This way no one will leave disappointed. He was no looker with that unwashed hair and too big smile. He worked as head bellman at the Breakers Hotel. In lieu of ambition, he had a zest for life. Instead of hooray or swell, he said ray, which was sort of cute. Sure, he lived with his mother, but so did Faye. She knew to run from a guy who was not simpatico with his mom. Faye was well liked on the community theater scene. She could understand French if it was spoken slowly. She could cook Thanksgiving food. She could walk on her hands. What she couldn't do was defy her mother. We'll take it, she said to the girl behind the counter. Ray, Derek said. The girl's eyes met Faye's before she dipped for the toy. Derek gave a swooping whistle, his eyes on the flyer. The second story I'm reading for you, thank you, was written for a special occasion, and that was Meg Pokrass's birthday a couple of years ago. It might have been 3 years ago. It was a while ago. And since Meg was my first flash fiction teacher, I'm a great admirer of her work, I had so much fun writing a story called Location, which is also incidentally set in a place where Meg and I both worked at one time, Beverly Hills, California. Location. Oh, and it was published in New Flash Fiction Review. My dry cleaner proposed to me at El Matador Beach over Malibu Country Mart's second cheapest bottle of Prosecco. We sat on a bench in the Bluff Top parking lot. I was queasy from the motorcycle ride. Leon worked in the basement in Santa Monica Boulevard's skyscraper. 14 floors above, I answered phones. So far, we had gone on 3 dates, if you could count walking his elderly bulldog as 2 of them. For this 4th date, I'd gotten a mani-pedi in scarlet at the ritzy salon over the little pedestrian bridge from the office. With my short fingernails, my hands looked like a pageant toddler's. Leon took a knee, held my sandaled foot. I meant to do this down at the beach, he began. I was raised to make a man wait as a way to supercharge my allure. By this point in my life, it was a habit. I smiled into his eyes and said I'd think about it. Very good, he said a little too loudly. I could see him clinging to the scene's romantic possibilities, that the glass-strewn lot, my roiling tummy, could be part of a cute story one day. That night, we slept together. I was house-sitting for a unit publicist I knew. She was constantly being flown around the country to work on location. Her bathroom cabinets overflowed with hotel toiletries. Our sleeping together was chaste. Leon and I wore the unit publicist's sweatshirt and pants. We fell asleep holding hands like a couple of stuffed otters. When I awoke, he left for work. He must have walked his motorcycle to the corner to avoid waking me. I would have welcomed a roar. Over backdoor stretches, I told my neighbor Thora what had happened. In her heyday, Thora had been one of those piano bar chanteuses who peppered her set with world-weary patter. But now she had entered the caftan and rattan furniture phase of life. Thora took my toddler hands in her own. We'll plan the nuptials together, she rasped. She raised her arms to salute the sun, her naked body visible through the bat-wing sleeve opening of her caftan. How does anyone know they are in their heyday, in the right location? I hated my job, but I liked the view. The building was across from Santa Monica Boulevard from the Los Angeles Country Club. From the 14th floor, LA looked like a verdant plain. Jets ripped soft trails across the sky. Once I shook Magic Johnson's hand in the high-speed elevator. It was time for work. In the basement, it looked like no one was on duty. Here was my hope for Leon, that he'd roar off in his motorcycle in furious dismissal of me toward a wild future in a big sky location like Yuma or Gallup. But there he was, hunched like a fuss budget, picking up a scatter of safety pins from the floor. I ducked below the tall counter, but it was too late. I was just peering, I said. I always did give in to peer pressure, he said. His plastic half glasses were a little steamed. I shook my head, kindly I hoped. He nodded in understanding. Leon was no showstopper, but he had put a little spring in my step. Part of me wishes I was still there in the basement of that Beverly Hills skyscraper, curled up on the warm cement floor, as above me plastic-wrapped dresses and jackets churned their oval trajectory. Oh, Leon, I would have fallen for you hard if only you had left me behind. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Patricia Bidar. We're about halfway through with our spotlight readers, and I'm going to turn it over to my lovely co-host, Meg.
Thanks so much, Francine, and thank you so much, Patricia, for reading that story. It was so special to hear you read it. Boy, I wish we'd been buddies when we both had these strange times in Beverly.
More fun.
It would have been a lot more fun. Okay, our next reader is Jeff Harvey. Jeff Harvey grew up near Memphis and now calls San Diego his home. He reads for Fractured Lit and volunteers for Pencil House. He was on Wigleaf's Top 50 Longlists in 2023. His short fiction has recently appeared in Moon Park Review, 5 South Lit, Bending Genres, and Blink Inc. It's so exciting to have Jeff reading with us today. I got to know Jeff's work a few years ago, and it was a great discovery. His accessible stories and vivid characters just make me want to read more of him. So welcome, Jeff Harvey.
Thanks, Meg. And thank you and Francine for inviting me to read here today. I have 4 tiny micros. The first one is Summer of Love, which was published in 5 South. On the same day in August, I got my draft notice. Johnny received an acceptance from Emory. He drove us out into the country in a 65 Impala for our last night together, off a dirt road near Swenson's Pond. The humid evening with mosquitoes the size of dragonflies couldn't deter us. He lit a joint to clear the bugs in our brains. We slow danced as he hummed one of Bob Dylan's tunes, the one about having God on our side. Johnny's body was soothing like a Sunday morning. We raced to the pond and tore our clothing off along the way. We dove in and the warm water smelled of death. Green muck covered our bodies. We crawled out, and under the moonlight, Johnny promised to wait. Medical school and a successful future lay ahead for him. If I even survived, the damage could take an insurmountable toll. A flash of white soared past us and landed on a tree stump. It was a barn owl. He screeched out to us, then took flight again. I held Johnny's hand and we both sang that Dylan song together as we held each other one last time. The next piece is Mail, which was published in Moon Park Review. Mama got her first job as a nurse's aide that summer. She ordered me a pair of jeans from the Montgomery Ward catalog for 7th grade. Not Lee's like we always got, but Mail, a new brand. The soft material made my butt look full like David Cassidy's. On the first day of class, I wore them with an orange short-sleeved shirt and a pair of black Chuck Taylors. As I strutted down the hallway past Miss James's geography class, Benji yelled out, "He don't even know if he's a boy or a girl." His mom had to sew a tag on so he could remember. A few kids cackled, but I kept walking with my head held high because I knew what looked right. And Benji still wore the same crew cut from 1st grade. It was 1971 and we were 12. Time to get with it. An Evening with, published in Bending Genres. I found Mama's wig and green formal in her old trunk. She had worn them on her last birthday party at DeFranco's. After looking in the bathroom mirror, I imagined myself on a New York stage, singing her favorite numbers. I performed My Man and voiced every word with the sultriness of a wannabe homecoming queen and confidence of Ethel Merman on opening night. A noise startled me. Dad stood at the sink, washing out his thermos. A wave of red washed over me like when he found the pair of Fruit of the Looms that I'd dyed purple. He said, no need to dress up for dinner on my account, and then headed out to his Barca lounger to watch the news about Nixon's latest scandal. And Haywire, which was in Moon Park Review. Sam bought a Playgirl at Lenny's Books. We drank Strawberry Hill in his Pontiac in the mall parking lot and devoured the pictures. I'd met him at band practice. He played drums and I faked the saxophone to get out of PE. While playing ping pong, I told Sam I could love another man in the same way men and women love each other. He went haywire and broke a window, then threatened me with a shard of glass. I called him, but he refused to talk. His family placed him in a treatment center for manic depression. I joined the Navy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was wonderful. Thank you for
Thanks.
reading. Thank you for being with us. It was really a treat. I don't think I've ever heard you read aloud before, so that was really, really exciting. Our next reader is Valerie Fox. Valerie has won the Fair's Right Words competition and has had stories in the Best Microfiction and Best Small Fictions anthologies. Her poetry books include The Rorschach Factory, Strawgate Books, and Insomniatic, PS Books. With visual artist Jacqueline Doyle, I hope I pronounced that right, she created The Real Sky, a handmade book in an edition of 26. I'm thrilled to have Valerie here with us today. I've known Valerie's work, both poetry, fiction, and hybrid, for many, many years, and I've always been fascinated by her voice. She is now the managing editor of New Flash Fiction Review, and we're really lucky to have her with us. Welcome, Valerie.
Well, thank you so much to you for that, and it's so wonderful to hear everybody. You know, that was really amazing, Jeff, and everyone. It's great to hear this work out loud. So I'm going to read a short flash called "I Keep Trying to Name the City I Often Dream of," and it's in one of my favorite magazines, the Café Ariel, which I know a few of you have been in. It's such a cool place. I keep trying to name the city I often dream of. I'm not getting evicted, but it feels that way. I have a little clay animal in my pocket, a gift from the year of the pig. My father, recently retired, turns up to help me move. This place I'm leaving is like the one I lived in for 5 years in Ikebukuro back in my 20s while I was teaching English at a junior college for women in Japan. My father loads up my suitcases into his milk and bread delivery truck. He has milk and bread in there, maybe a few live animals, hopefully no poisonous snakes. I remember the truck from when I was a kid and used to go with him now and again on his deliveries during the summer. The shelving in there smells sour and yeasty. As far as I know, it's been 20, 30, 40 years since my father has carried a passport, so it's unexpected that he manages to find himself in this foreign-feeling place in order to help me with my move. Not much of a letter writer, my father only ever wrote me once. His choppy, left-handed handwriting resembled bird tracks. I was in my 3rd year of college, and he wrote to tell me that he was proud. My father drives off, leaving me by myself to make my way to an appointment with an old friend who's going to pay me some money to pick my brain to, quote, tell him my life story. The amount of money he's going to pay me to translates to about $10,000. This doesn't feel quite enough for a whole life story. But like Uncle Teddy used to say back on the deteriorating farm when he was trying to get us to try his latest banana bread variation, you gotta eat. Tripping along, I find myself blocked by many people clogging the train station entrance. I go up the steps and into the doors that look most familiar, but once inside, it's unlike any place I have ever visited. Where there used to be a passenger waiting area, there are now staircases and other exercise equipment. The clay pig in my pocket is supposed to bring me luck, so I touch it and jostle it a few times. I realize that I'm as likely to walk on water as arrive on time for my appointment to speak about my life and how, sequentially, I have lived it thus far. So, since I'm going to be late anyway, I duck into a quaint coffee shop and reach for my wallet in order to pay. I have all different kinds of money, and one of them must work here. It's only then that I notice someone has been tampering with my handbag. Someone has substituted a small reporter's notebook for my leatherette journal with pockets. I hope it isn't anyone at the travel agency where I work. Sure, lately I've been falling asleep at work or going into some other sleep-like trance, but I love my job and talking to people. I'm a people person. Perhaps lately I haven't been as productive or friendly and more prone to just going through the motions of greeting and filling out forms and all. Recently, I found myself getting off on the wrong floor, the one with the law offices. I find these words in a small notebook. Ennui, tickets to Bangkok, track number 3. Also, a childlike drawing of a grinning pig. What with this being such a crowded city, it is commonplace for strangers to sit down alongside one another. I'm slurping my Americano, which ordinarily deters strangers from joining me. But today, I look up to notice that someone has seated himself right next to me. He's a dead ringer for Kaz, the man I intend to meet and tell my life story to. Excuse me, he says. He has a charming Australian accent, just like the friend I am on my quest to meet. He says, if I may be so bold, you have a lost and clouded look. Thanks.
That's
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much. I love those. Next up is Tim Craig. Tim lives in London, a winner of the Bridport Prize for Flash Fiction. His short stories have appeared 3 times in the Best Microfiction Anthology and placed 4 times in the Bath Flash Fiction Award. His collection, Now You See Him, was longlisted for the Edgehill Prize in 2023. Just want to say Tim is on my side of the pond, and he's one of the funniest, nicest writers to have coffee with in a Tufnell Park coffee shop in London. And photos of Tim's dog on Twitter and elsewhere are hilarious. So welcome, Tim Craig.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Meg. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Meg and Francine, both for inviting me along to read tonight. I'm also coming out the back of a cold, a tenacious cold. So if you've seen me drinking this, it's purely for medicinal reasons. And I should also add that it is 8:20 in the evening here, so it's perhaps loud. So I'm going to read three short micros from the aforementioned collection. Now You See Him, and the first one is called Cat Barbecue. It goes like this. In years to come, this is how Dana and Greg will refer to it. And when they do, their friends will give them strange looks and say things like, "You barbecued a cat? And the hell did that taste like?" Which will make the two of them roll their eyes. But right now, they are still young, and they are here, drinking beer, and their host's cat is weaving in and out of their legs in that seductive electric way cats do. The hot fat from the grill has yet to drip off the grill onto the cat's back, causing it to dart in terror through the fence, out into the road where the laundry truck, driven by a guy called Ricky, who's on his phone, but who probably wouldn't have been able to stop in time anyway, has yet to appear. Greg has his strong arm around Dana, his right thumb teasing the underneath of her breast through the material. The breast that, years from now, will be the source of the trouble not even his strong arm will be able to fix. And he'll wonder if he shouldn't have felt something all those years earlier, maybe even at the cat barbecue. Because these things, he's read somewhere online start long before you know. But Dana will get irritated and say, if I didn't know back then, how the fuck were you supposed to know? Though that's all for the future. And right now it's just a barbecue, not yet even the cat barbecue. And the cat is weaving in and out of their legs in that seductive electric way, and the moon is high, and everyone is young. Yeah, this cat barbecue. And this is, I suppose, the title track for the collection, which is Now You See Him. And it goes like this. My father could slip through keyholes and similar small openings. Sure, other kids' dads could do some impressive things like fix car engines, build sheds, or start campfires with a piece of broken glass. But none of them could disappear without trace from a room where an argument was brewing like my dad could. It was a superpower, which served him well through the long years he spent in our too small house with his 2 quarreling kids and 2 angry wife. Awkward conversations were no match for this legendary escapologist. At the first sign of trouble, he would slide unnoticed between the pages of his hardback. And as for difficult questions, why does no one speak to your brother anymore? This was a favourite. What does gay mean? This was 1976. What would you say if Tina brought home a black boyfriend? This was England in 1976. A gay black boyfriend. This actually happened. He would suddenly remember something that needed to be done in the garage and teleport himself through the wall. But even Houdini's luck ran out one day. As my father lay in the metal hospital bed, strapped down like Gulliver, we closed the windows and sealed the exits. For 3 weeks, we bombarded him with small talk just to keep him from slipping away, until the moment we told him we loved him, when, in a single bound, he vanished up the coiled, sucking hose of the ventilator, leaving us waiting for the reply. Still. Thank you very much. And the final one is That's All There Is, There Ain't No More. And it's about the card game cribbage, if you know that game. It's something that sons and fathers play together sometimes. And other people, of course. But in this case, it's a son and a father. Cribbage is a traditional card game for 2 players. For example, a father and his son who haven't spoken for 6 years, in which the object is to score 121 points while avoiding eye contact. Cribbage is a game played by a father and his adult son, where the wooden scoring board serves as a proxy for difficult conversation. Cribbage was invented by the 17th century poet, Sir John Suckling, although whether he devised the game to provide a neutral space in which he and his father could coexist without speaking is not recorded. Cribbage is often played in dark corners of pubs by a father and son who would rather look at their cards, 15-2, 15-4, that's all there is, there ain't no more, than each other's faces. In cribbage, a card game often played between a father and his son, now also a father himself, there are exactly 1,009,008 combinations of hands which score no points at all, while the top score possible with a single hand is 29. Although the game is often played in complete silence by, say, a father and son who have long forgotten how to speak to each other, cribbage nevertheless boasts its own rich glossary of phrases, like 1 for his knob and 2 for his heels. It has also given the English language such everyday expressions as pegging it and streets ahead. The card game cribbage is most commonly played by 2 players, e.g., a father and the adult son he cannot bring himself to forgive. In this version, the winner is the first person to move his matchstick or peg up and down the crib board twice, drain his pint glass, look at his watch, and say, "Aye, well." Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Those were remarkable. Thank you. Beautiful reading. Next up is Charlotte Hamrick. She writes, reads, and photographs extraordinary everyday things in New Orleans. Her work is included in a number of literary magazines and anthologies, including the Best Small Fictions 2022 and 2023 anthologies, Flash Frontier, Still, The Journal, New World Writing, and Atticus Review. She is features editor for Reckon Review. I'm so happy to have Charlotte here with us. I'm a big admirer of her writing. This is a real delight. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you, Meg. I want to thank you and Francine for inviting me to read, and I hope my voice doesn't shake because I've only done this a couple of times. And thanks to everyone who's listening. I'm going to read two short pieces. The first one was published in Bending Genres. When Your Mama Leaves a Guardian Angel. Raylene lived with her mama in a weather-beaten house on a red dirt road where the guttural hum of a bluesy organ streamed out the open windows into the shimmering Mississippi heat. She was older than us, with slinky-like chestnut curls that bounced like thunder when she tossed her head at her boyfriend Rooster. They fought and made up on the regular, mostly because Raylene didn't take any shit off him. She had plans that he said were crazy, and she'd best hurry up and think about settling down. We liked spending time with Raylene because she treated us like equals. She told us about men and how we should always keep our eyes open when dealing with them and not fall for their sweet talk and kisses, and never let them tell us what our lives were supposed to be. When she talked like that, a look like a barracuda on a mission came into her eyes. Percy Sledge would be singing Honey from the turntable, wrapping us all up in his warm and tender love, and I'd think, that is a man that cannot lie. And I knew Raylene believed it too. She swore Percy was good juju, the last voice she heard every night, looking up through the oaks to the stars and thinking about how far away the road ran outside her door. Raylene and Rooster met early most mornings in the Jitney Jungle parking lot when she was going into her shift checking groceries, and he was getting off his at Deer. Rooster would lay his calloused hands on Raylene's cheeks, pull her face closer, kiss her like he was trying to suck her soul out of her body. That's what she said. We didn't know what to say back, so we watched her face real close, watched her eyelashes rippling up and down like she was trying to swim away from that memory. Raylene's mama was killed by her boyfriend in a car chase. He ran her off the road in a drunken rage when she tried to leave him. Clots of red bloomed around her head into the creek water, flowed away like jellyfish into the deep. Baby Raylene didn't have a scratch on her. Her mama said Percy's voice was warbling from the tape deck when the highway patrol arrived. Said Percy blew a bubble in the back seat, and that's what saved baby Raylene. Raylene said he latched onto her and never left. Said he whispered things in her ear ever after. Important things like what ran through Rooster's head when he watched her walk across Jitney Jungle's parking lot. On the 20th anniversary morning of her mama's death, Raylene took both of Rooster's scratchy country hands in hers and kissed his palms. I was never going to be the right woman for you, no matter how much you wanted it. Then she climbed into the old Stingray she bought with 4 years of grocery store wages and drove off. 6 months later, we got a card in the mail from Weeki Wachee, Florida. Inside was a Polaroid of Raylene, suspended in turquoise, hair floating a sunny halo around her head, and a silver sequined clipper curving up behind her. The next one was published in Hobart. Anything is possible. Tom and Dale were like Jack and Coke, cruising down the neck of town in Tom's long, cool convertible, me waiting in front of the Quick Pick in 90% humidity on a July day, holding a corn snake in a cardboard box. Dale was deathly scared of snakes and nosy. I was tired of playing second fiddle to Tom. Placing the box in his lap, I said, Dale, would y'all take this box to Witte Jane for me? I have to work a double shift. They say Dale ran all the way to the next county. Not far enough, in my opinion. I started working at the Quick Pick when I was 16, and Daddy lost his job at the chemical plant. Sidney was the new owner, new to town, new to the South. He picked his cuticles, pronounced hard R's. He was convinced I had scared off customers. Traffic has decreased since your snake escapade. People think you might fling one on them if you get mad. I might if they don't stop poking the produce, I said. Everybody knows corn snakes are harmless anyway. He started picking his cuticles. Well, I'm sorry, Ruby, but I can't have somebody keeping snakes in my store and bagging groceries. It's not sanitary, he said. I heard him on the phone talking to Percy, the reptile trapper, about searching the premises. Me and Percy are cousins. I called him too. It was a beautiful day. I was waiting on the porch when I saw a cloud of dust down the road and a rumble like a bobcat on the prowl. Tom's red Impala emerged, fins looking like wings of freedom. He pulled up with a winking smile, singing Little Runaway. I threw my Samsonite on the back seat and hopped in. You call Raylene? He asked. Yep, she's already got me an interview at WikiWatchy and started sewing sequins on a tail pin, I replied. Sometimes dreams run us down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Oh my God, these readings were really wonderful. All of them. Like, I'm so blown away. Well, back to you, Francine.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the readers. WikiWatchy just reminds me of those. I remember the commercials from when I was a kid, and these women swimming around, and these. I was like, oh my God, how do they hold their breath? But you know, that was a nice little memory there. Wonderful readings. Thank you so much to the readers today. Jeff Friedman, our wonderful feature reader. And Myna Chang, Dan Crawley, Jackie Doyle, Patricia Bidar, Jeff Harvey, Valerie Fox, Tim Craig, and Charlotte Hamrick. And this reading will get a second life in when I put it up the recording. I'll put it up on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're looking, you know, even if you've been here in the Zoom room and you want more information about any of the readers or where can I buy your book or what's your website or whatever, you know, just ask in the comments there. That might be the best way to connect. So we really enjoyed this reading, and it's nice when the hosts enjoy the reading too, right? And in the future, we're going to be, you know, playing around with many different formats. Like we've been having one feature and 8 spotlights, but we might do 10 spotlights with no feature, or we might have 2 features and 6 spotlights, or we might have an all open mic, you know, who knows? Who knows? So stay tuned. You know, we like to keep it real here in the Prose Garden. So but thank you mostly all of you for being here and for listening and your wonderful kind attention and just making this a joy for Meg and I to do. And I thank you to my lovely co-host, Meg Pokrass. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful afternoon and evening. Good night.